Social studies. Let's do a geography lesson. And let me get the timer started here so we can jump right into this. 15 minutes and we will rock and roll. All right, we're going. Trace the expansion of the U.S. It's going to be a little bit of an ugly story throughout the 17 and 1800s and describe why people migrate. There are two basic reasons why people move, why they go somewhere or leave somewhere. There's other reasons, but there's two big ones for America then, and there's the same two big reasons people move to America now. So here's the 50 states in front of us. Hopefully you know these states. If you don't, no big deal. Let's talk about how some of the states were formed. We'll start out with 13 colonies. These are not states. These are colonies. So England established these colonies. But before there were even colonies, there were just a couple settlements. The first settlement will be Roanoke Island in North Carolina, and it's a failure. It's a disaster. No one really knows what happened. The people just disappeared. There's a lot of mysteries and stories if you want to do the research. Did they get taken by aliens? That's kind of a little bit of out there story, but hey, you never know. Did the Indians kill them? American Indians kill them? Did they join and become a part of an American Indian tribe? No one really knows. Croatoan was carved on some stone, whatever. Now, Jamestown is the next settlement a couple years later, and it's a success, but barely. The people starved to death. They almost all die. A lot of really bad, terrible things happen, but you got John Smith and John Rolfe who actually get the stuff together and figure it out. Jamestown is still there today. It is an example of a successful colony and the beginning of America, and it represents one of the reasons why people move to this country. Economic opportunity, jobs, jobs. Why do people move to America today? To get rich, or at least to get a job. A lot of the countries that they're leaving are not very successful. It's hard to get a job. There's a lot of problems. You come to America, you can make some money, and you can support your family. Same reason that people came to Jamestown then, same people come to Jamestown now, or well, come to America now. Plymouth represents another reason people migrate to this country or immigrate to this country, and it's religious freedom. The Pilgrims or the Puritans came to America because they wanted to worship Christ the way that they wanted to worship him, not the way anyone else did. They wanted to have religious freedom. And that's another reason that people come to this country today, to worship the way that they want, because our government respects your religious freedom and you can worship however you want. So Plymouth and Jamestown represent two reasons why people migrate to this country: job opportunities and economic freedom. That's 1776. Now, Jamestown and Plymouth are in the early 1600s. 1604 Jamestown, 1620 for Plymouth. 1776, we kick out the British. We no longer want to be colonies. We want to run this show, and we create our own states. Eventually, we set up Kentucky, Tennessee, and Ohio. By 1809, we want to establish more states, and this is called the Northwest Territory. What? Now, typically, we refer to America as Washington and Oregon, and this area as the Northwest, because it's the Northwest of America today. But back then, the Northwest was Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin. And the big question, once we remove the American Indians, sorry, but that's just another story of not just American history, America, Europe, Asia, Africa, in every country or every continent around the world where countries have been established, there's usually differing people there, and there's conflicts, and there's winners and losers. People get removed from land, people fight, they kill. And unfortunately, one of the sad stories of America's conquest of our continent and the establishment of our 50 states means that the people that were here before, the Native Americans that were here before, were removed through the land, often through violence. And in this case, the American Indians were removed for American settlements. The next question, though, is what do we do with this territory? In the South, you have slaves. In the North, up here, you don't have slaves. So what should you do with the Northwest? Well, the rational person would say, well, that's technically North, so we should make them not slave states. But that really didn't matter. There wasn't a real we're North, so no slaves, and we're South. The reason why was geographically, one of the big reasons was slaves just did not fit into the economies up here. There weren't going to be giant plantations. The weather and the climate did not really suit widespread slavery. And the people who wanted to establish these colonies or these states were the people in the North. So the people that were moving to set this up, mainly from Massachusetts and Boston, the people that were moving here to establish these new states were coming from states that did not have slavery, or at least widespread slavery. So they said that when we're going to set up these new states, we're going to take what we believe and say, yeah, no slavery here. Now, if for whatever reason, the southern states would have established Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois. It would have been a different story. They likely would have taken their culture, their values, and then superimposed them onto these Northwest territories and said, well, we believe in slavery, so we're going to continue it. But the way that it worked was it was these New Englanders who established these states, and so their idea was slavery bad. And so these states would not have slavery. And so as we develop, as we go through and create new states, that's the big question. Slavery or no slavery? Move my picture. Fine. Less farming competition. Whatever. All right. Moving on. The next big issue is the Louisiana Purchase. So here's America. Now, technically, half of this land in America is owned by France. Yeah. So we kicked England out. France is still hanging around and still has all this land out here. And we never really worried about it because we're over here doing our thing. Like, oh, but they're on our land. Well, I mean, look, this is a long time ago. This is way, way, way far apart. There are no cars. You're pretty separated when you can only travel by horse. And a lot of this is forest. It's not easy to get over here. So we kind of just let them do our own thing. Now, Napoleon, during this time in the early 1800s, is in the middle of a giant war with England, and he needs that cash. And so we say, hey, look, not that President Jefferson. Sorry. No, not him. Not Sherman Jefferson. Yeah, that Thomas Jefferson says, hey, we'll give you some cash and we'll buy the land, even though Thomas Jefferson technically says, I don't think we can legally do this because of the Constitution. And Jefferson's the guy who believes like strict interpretation of the Constitution. I cannot do anything that's not in the Constitution except for when I really, really want to do something like buy land from Napoleon. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. And he does. And we buy all of this land, which is a great idea. Like, look, sometimes you're not allowed to do something, but that's a lot of land. How do you pass up on that? You can be as principled as possible. Say, I only do what I believe. Yeah, but you kind of need to do that. So we buy this land. Now, got to remove the Indians again. I'm sorry. And I shouldn't be so glib about that. But the next big question is slavery or no slavery. What are we going to do? So they got to figure out what are they going to do with all this area, which they'll call the Missouri Territory, which was the Louisiana Territory. What are you going to do? Slavery or no slavery? So as we move west, we got to figure it out. Now, this time period is called Manifest Destiny. This land is dedicated to us or by God. He says, hey, go get that land. God didn't say get that land. Well, whatever. We believed it. And sometimes you just got to believe it. Like, God told us to take over the land. It's our land. And you tell yourself that so that you can steal land from American Indians. It's kind of the way it is, right? You might feel kind of dirty about killing a lot of American Indians and stealing their land. But when you believe God told you to do it and it's our God-given right to take this land, then you don't feel so dirty about it. It's weird, but that's what happened. So now we're going to try to establish all these states and figure out slavery, no slavery. What are we going to do? Well, the first question is Missouri. That's the first state that gets set up. I'm like, what are we going to do? Slavery or no slavery? And the government's fighting over it, and the people are fighting over it. Well, slavery's up here in the north, but no slavery in the south. Well, this one's in between. What do we do? I don't know. And so they decide, all right, well, Missouri will be a slave state, but to even it out, Maine, we'll just create Maine out of thin air. Maine wasn't a state, and Maine was a part of New England. And they said, all right, well, we'll just make Maine its own state, and it's a free state. So now we're even. Oh, okay. And then moving forward, any state north of 36 degrees, 30 latitude will be a free state, and any state that we create south of 36 degrees latitude, that's this line right here, which is basically south of Missouri, slave state. Pretty simple. North, free states, south, slave states. Not that confusing. We got it. Boom. No more worries. Well, there is kind of a worry because we're talking about slavery. We can't have slavery. That's going to be an issue. I mean, it's nice to not have to argue about free or slave, but we're still talking about slavery. Got to figure that one out. So that's going to be an issue moving forward. So there it is. Even though you look like, wait, that doesn't make sense. Why is Missouri a slave state? Because it's north of the line. Shouldn't it be a free state? Well, they had to do a compromise. And technically, like you think, like, well, shouldn't you put that line above Missouri? Well, if you put the line above Missouri, then it's kind of above Illinois, Indiana. Ohio. What would we do there? Anyway, that's what they decide. And so Missouri becomes a slave state, Maine becomes a free state, and that line's supposed to extend. And so it's like, all right, so all this will be free and all this will be slave. Good, we got it figured out. North of the line, 36 degrees. South of the line, slave state. No more worries. Well, so we got some problems. So first of all, people start moving west. 1836, they move into Texas. And Texas is owned by Mexico. And the Mexicans say, come on in, but no slaves. You can come into Texas, no problem. We want more people. We want farms. We want to grow our economy. Come to our country. But the only thing is, you Americans don't bring any slaves. We don't want any slaves here. And the Americans say, Nah, we want to bring our slaves. It's the way it works. And so they fight a war. The Texans fight a war against Mexico. So the Texans versus an entire nation of Mexico, and the Texans win. But they're fighting for slaves. But they do, and they win. All right, cool. Well, we want to keep moving west, and we do want to move west. So the first thing we do is we see all this giant land out here, and we want to keep adding it to our country, especially these slave states. They want more power in the government, and what they want to do is add more states because more states mean more voting, and so they want to expand. So we buy Oregon, and we also say, Texas, you can join the country. Because remember, Texas is its own thing. It's its own republic. It was just some Americans that moved to Mexico. They fought a war. They won the war. And they created their own nation. Texas was its own thing for a little while. And we say, Texas, come join us. Come join us. And Mexico's like, no. You can't just take that. We haven't given up on Texas yet. That's still ours. Just because we lost a little bit of a war. You can't take them from us. We're like, oh, we can't? Yeah, we will. And so we fight a war and say, not only are we going to take Texas, we're going to take it all. We're going to take New Mexico, Arizona, California. It's all ours. Big mistake, Mexico. It was a big mistake. They shouldn't have done that. So we take Texas. It's below the line, slave state. What about all this other territory? Well, the big question is California. And a lot of people rush to California because they find gold in California. So all of a sudden you got 50,000 people in California. What do? The line's in between. What do you do? Is it free state or is it slave state? Oh, no, I thought we all had it figured out. We had this whole thing figured out. North of it, south of it, no problems. Well, the Californians going to mess everything up. Well, it's pretty simple. We got all these people moving out here. What do we do, slave state or no state? They decide no slaves. It's pretty simple. You let the people in California vote, and the people in California came together and said, we don't want slaves. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. We don't want them. Don't want slaves. Like government, chill out. Not a big deal. We don't want it. And the government gets mad, especially these southern states. Like, wait, you can't just decide. We're the government. We make the decisions. And the people were, no, we decided no slaves. That's the way it is. And then moving forward, people are like, oh yeah, popular sovereignty. That's a great idea. Just let the people decide. Why are we getting drawing these lines? Slave state, no slave state. Just let the people decide. If the state wants slaves, let them have slaves. If they don't, they don't. Pretty simple. Just get rid of this line. This is stupid. Let the people vote. Popular sovereignty. So the next issue is Kansas. What are we going to do about Kansas? Kansas is the next state in line. All right, I guess we let the people vote. Well, so here's the problem with Kansas. Kansas is right on the border with a bunch of slave states and free states. And so people rush into Kansas. And all of a sudden you've got everybody, a bunch of people who believe in slavery moving into Kansas, people that don't believe in slavery moving into Kansas, and not just voting, they're killing each other. They're fighting a small war over slavery versus no slavery, which is going to turn into a big war called the Civil War, which will ultimately decide that America is going to be a no slavery nation. 2 minutes left. I'm doing all right. So again, the history of our country, the development of states, there's a lot of other stuff going on economically and the reasons that people are moving, but really the big topic of the development up until about the 1900s or up until the Civil War, the development of our country is slave state or no slave state. And that has a huge impact on the people, the culture, and the government. Kansas is kind of the final straw here. And eventually the South just says, we're tired of playing this game. We're going to start our own country. And so the South turns into the Confederate States of America, and the North turns into, what already was the United States of America. We fight the Civil War, and eventually the South loses. They have to give up the slavery thing, and they become part of the nation. And eventually these other territories will develop. But that's kind of the big picture. Why do people move? One, and always one, jobs, jobs. People come to America today for opportunities to make money because in their country there might be wars, there might be gangs, they might have an unstable government that makes it hard to make your money. They don't trust the banks for whatever reason. They say, I gotta get out of my home. I love my home. I love my language. I love my culture, but I can't provide for my family unless I go to America, and I go to America. And even just working at a job at McDonald's, a lot of times an immigrant can make more money in America than they can in their home. And a lot of times they'll make money in this country and then send it back to help out their family abroad. It's very significant. A lot of the money that goes into China every single year is made in America and sent back to support the struggling low-income families in China. It's very common for people to come to America for jobs. Same reason they came to Jamestown in 1604. Same reason people are coming today. The other reason, big reason, Plymouth up here in Massachusetts, 1620, they came for religious freedom. They wanted to be able to worship whatever they wanted, to believe in whatever they wanted. And the same reason that people come to America today, be it Christians, be it Muslims, be it atheists, it does not matter what you believe. You can come to America America, and the government is not going to tell you no. You have the privacy and the right to believe in what you want. That was started in 1620 in Plymouth. That's why they came to America, and it's the reason that we are still coming to America today. 18 seconds left. I think we pretty much summarized it. The big idea here, the reason the development of the country, unfortunately, there was the genocide and ethnic cleansing of the American Indians. Terrible thing, but it is not uncommon. It is not unique only to America. You look at the development of every nation throughout Europe, every nation throughout Africa, every nation through Asia. There's going to be bloodshed. There's going to be genocide. There are going to be people who are murdered and killed based on the group that they belong to. There's going to be racism involved in that as well. It is terrible, and it shouldn't just be easily dismissed. But it is something that happens. And then the final part of the development of America and the adding of new states is the idea of slavery having a big part of that.